The crack of the bartender's hand across Olivia Jenkins's face echoed through the Red Canyon Saloon like a gunshot, and every man in that smoke-filled room froze with their cards or whiskey glasses halfway to their lips. August Anderson saw the whole thing from where he stood at the bar, his trail-worn body tense as wire, as he watched the young woman stumble backward, her cheek already blooming red where the bartender's knuckles had connected. She had been working behind the bar for the past hour, her dark hair pulled back in a practical bun, her calico dress simple but clean, and she had been nothing but polite to every drunken gambler who had called for service. But when the heavy-set man at the corner table had demanded she pour him another whiskey after he had already consumed half a bottle, and she had quietly suggested he might have had enough, the bartender himself had come storming over and struck her hard enough to make her teeth rattle. August's jaw tightened as he watched Olivia press her hand to her reddening cheek, her brown eyes wide with shock and pain. The bartender, a barrel-chested man named Calhoun with a scar running down his left temple, grabbed her by the arm and shook her like a rag doll. "You do not tell the customers what they can and cannot drink, girl," Calhoun snarled, his breath reeking of the same whiskey he served. "You pour what they ask for when they ask for it, or you will find yourself out in the street with nothing." The drunk at the corner table laughed, a wet, ugly sound that made August's blood run cold. "That is right," the man slurred, slamming his meaty palm on the table. "Bring me that bottle and do not give me any more of your lip." Olivia's chin trembled, but she lifted it with a defiance that made something in August's chest tighten. "I will not," she said, her voice shaking but clear. "You have had too much already. I will not be responsible for what happens when you ride out of here and fall off your horse or worse." Calhoun's face turned purple with rage, and he raised his hand again. August moved without thinking, his boots hitting the sawdust-covered floor in 3 long strides. His hand caught Calhoun's wrist mid-swing, his grip like iron as he held the bartender's arm suspended in the air. Every eye in the saloon turned to him, and the piano player in the corner stopped mid-chord. "That is enough," August said quietly, his voice carrying in the sudden silence. He was not a large man, but there was something in his bearing that made men think twice before crossing him. His face was weathered from years under the Texas sun, his eyes a piercing blue beneath the shadow of his hat, and the gun at his hip sat easy and familiar like it was an extension of his own body. Calhoun tried to jerk his wrist free, but August's grip did not budge. "This is none of your concern, cowboy," the bartender spat. "This girl works for me, and I will discipline her as I see fit." "Discipline and beating are 2 different things, auditeurs," August replied, his tone level but edged with steel. "And I do not stand by and watch women get hit. Not in my presence." The drunk at the corner table lurched to his feet, swaying dangerously. "Who asked for your opinion?" he demanded, his words slurring together. "The girl needs to learn her place, and if Calhoun here wants to teach her, that is his business." August finally released Calhoun's wrist and turned to face the drunk man fully. His hand did not move toward his gun, but the threat was implicit in the easy way he stood, balanced and ready. "The way I see it, the lady was doing you a favor," he said, "trying to keep you from making a fool of yourself or getting hurt. But if you want more whiskey so badly, I will take care of it." He walked to the bar, where Olivia still stood with her hand pressed to her cheek, her eyes following him with a mixture of fear and confusion. August reached across the bar and picked up the bottle of whiskey that sat there, the one the drunk had been demanding. The glass was half full, the amber liquid sloshing against the sides. August uncorked it and walked back to the corner table. The drunk man watched him approach with bleary eyes, a triumphant sneer starting to form on his lips. August lifted the bottle high, and for a moment everyone thought he was going to hand it over. Instead, he turned it upside down and let the whiskey pour out onto the sawdust floor in a steady stream. The liquid darkened the pale wood shavings, the smell of it sharp and acrid in the close air. The drunk man's mouth fell open in shock, and Calhoun let out a roar of rage. "That is $2 worth of whiskey," Calhoun shouted, his face turning red again. August tossed the empty bottle onto the table, where it rolled to a stop with a hollow sound. He reached into his vest pocket and pulled out a handful of coins, counting out the appropriate amount, and then adding several more. He walked back to the bar and set the money down with a decisive clink. "That covers the whiskey," he said, "and the rest is for the lady's trouble." He met Calhoun's furious gaze without flinching. She was right to refuse him. A man that drunk has no business with more alcohol, and you know it. Calhoun looked like he wanted to argue, but the sight of the money on the bar seemed to cool his rage slightly. Money was money, and August had paid more than the whiskey was worth. Still, the bartender's pride was wounded, and he turned his glare on Olivia. "You are lucky this man has more dollars than sense," he said coldly. "But do not think this means you can refuse customers whenever you feel like it. One more incident like this and you are finished here?" Olivia nodded silently, her hand still pressed to her cheek. August could see tears threatening at the corners of her eyes, but she blinked them back with fierce determination. He admired that, the way she held herself together even when she was clearly hurting and scared. The drunk at the corner table had slumped back into his chair, muttering curses under his breath, but he made no move to continue the confrontation. The other patrons slowly returned to their cards and conversations, the tension in the room easing by degrees. August picked up his own drink from where he had left it at the bar and took a slow sip, watching Olivia from the corner of his eye. She had lowered her hand from her cheek, revealing the angry red mark that was already starting to darken into a bruise. She moved mechanically, wiping down the bar with a rag that trembled slightly in her grip. August set down his glass and leaned closer, keeping his voice low enough that only she could hear. "Are you all right?" he asked. Olivia glanced at him, surprise flickering across her face. Up close, he could see that she was younger than he had first thought, probably no more than 22 or 23. Her eyes were a warm brown, and despite the bruise blossoming on her cheek, she had a quiet prettiness about her. "I am fine," she said, though her voice wavered. "Thank you for what you did. You did not have to." "I know," August replied, "but it was the right thing to do." She looked down at the rag in her hands, twisting it between her fingers. "Calhoun will not forget this," she said quietly. "He does not like being challenged, especially not in front of customers." "Then maybe you should not be working for him," August said bluntly. Olivia's laugh was short and bitter. "I wish it were that simple," she said. "But jobs for women in Desdemona are scarce, and I need the money. My mother is ill, and the doctor does not come cheap." August felt a pang of sympathy. He knew what it was like to be trapped by circumstances, to have to make choices that were not really choices at all. "What is wrong with your mother?" he asked. "Lung fever," Olivia said, her voice thick with worry. "She has had it for months now, and it just keeps getting worse. The doctor says she needs rest and medicine, but medicine costs money, and rest does not pay the bills." She paused, then looked up at him with a flicker of curiosity. "What is your name?" "August Anderson," he said, tipping his hat slightly, as most folks just call me August. "Olivia Jenkins," she replied, "though I suppose you could have guessed that from Calhoun shouting at me." "It is a pleasure to meet you, Miss Jenkins," August said, "even under the circumstances." A faint smile touched her lips, the first genuine expression he had seen from her. "The pleasure is mine, Mr. Anderson." They stood there for a moment, the noise of the saloon fading into the background as they looked at each other. There was something in that moment, a connection that August could not quite name, but felt all the same. It was like the world had narrowed down to just the two of them, and everything else was just noise and shadow. Calhoun's voice cut through the moment like a knife. "Olivia," he barked from the other end of the bar, "get back to work. These glasses will not wash themselves." Olivia's expression shuddered, the brief warmth disappearing behind a mask of careful neutrality. "I should go," she said to August. "Thank you again." August nodded, stepping back to let her pass. He watched as she moved down the bar to where a stack of dirty glasses waited, her movements efficient despite the pain she must have been feeling. He finished his drink and set the glass down, his mind already working through the problem. He did not like the idea of leaving her here, at the mercy of a man like Calhoun, but he also knew he could not force her to leave. That decision had to be hers. He left the saloon as the sun was starting to set, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. Desdemona was a small town, the kind that had sprung up almost overnight when cattle drives had started coming through this part of Texas. It was 1878, and the West was still wild, still full of rough men and rougher justice. The main street was lined with wooden buildings, their facades promising everything from dry goods to legal services, though August knew that half of them were barely more than facades themselves. He had been passing through Desdemona on his way to a ranch job further north, but now he found himself reconsidering his plans. There was something about Olivia Jenkins that had gotten under his skin, something more than just the injustice of watching her get struck. He had seen plenty of injustice in his 30 years, enough that he should have been numb to it by now. But there was a quality to her defiance, to the way she had stood up for what she believed was right, even knowing it would cost her, that reminded him of why he had left home in the first place all those years ago. He found a room at the boarding house on the edge of town, a simple space with a bed, a washstand, and a window that looked out over the dusty street. After cleaning up and changing into a fresh shirt, he lay on the bed and stared at the ceiling, his mind refusing to settle. He kept seeing Olivia's face, the red mark on her cheek, the way her hands had trembled even as she had held her ground. The next morning, August returned to the Red Canyon Saloon. It was early, and the place was quiet except for Calhoun sweeping the floor and a couple of men nursing coffee at a corner table. Olivia was behind the bar, arranging bottles on the shelf. The bruise on her cheek had darkened overnight, a purple shadow that made August's jaw tighten with anger all over again. She looked up as he approached, surprise and something else, maybe wariness, crossing her face. "Mr. Anderson," she said, "I did not expect to see you again." "I wanted to check on you," August said, taking a seat at the bar. "How are you feeling?" Olivia touched her cheek self-consciously. "I have had worse," she said, which was not really an answer. "Can I get you something? Coffee?" "Coffee would be good," August said. She poured him a cup from the pot that was heating on a small stove behind the bar. The coffee was strong and bitter, but it was hot, and that was enough. August wrapped his hands around the cup and looked at her. "I meant what I said yesterday," he told her, "about this not being a good place for you to work." Olivia glanced over her shoulder to where Calhoun was still sweeping, his back to them. "And I meant what I said about not having many options," she replied quietly. "Believe me, if I could work anywhere else, I would. But most of the respectable businesses in town will not hire a woman without references, and the only reference I have is from a laundry in San Antonio where I worked before my mother got sick." "Why did you leave San Antonio?" August asked. "My mother wanted to move here," Olivia said. "She thought the air might be better for her lungs. Desdemona is smaller, quieter than San Antonio, but it has not helped. And now we are stuck here with no money to go back and no prospects to move forward." August took a sip of his coffee, thinking. An idea was forming in his mind. Reckless and probably foolish, but he could not shake it. "What if there was another option?" he said slowly. Olivia looked at him, her expression guarded. "What kind of option?" "I'm on my way to a ranch up north," August said. "The Rocking M outside of a town called Mineral Wells. The owner, a man named Marcus Tate, is an old friend of mine. He is always looking for good workers, and I know his wife has been wanting help with the household. It is honest work, and it pays fair." Olivia's eyes widened. "You are suggesting I just leave? Pack up and move to some ranch I have never heard of?" "I am suggesting you consider it," August said. "You and your mother both. Marcus has a big house, plenty of room. His wife, Clara, is a kind woman. She would make sure your mother got the care she needs, and you would not have to work in a place like this." For a moment, Olivia looked like she wanted to say yes. August could see the longing in her eyes, the desperate hope that there might be a way out of the trap her life had become. But then she shook her head, the hope fading. "I cannot," she said. "I do not even know you, Mr. Anderson. And my mother is too sick to travel. The doctor says any kind of strain could kill her." August felt a stab of disappointment, but he nodded. "I understand," he said, "but the offer stands if you change your mind. I will be in town for a few more days before I head north." "Why are you doing this?" Olivia asked suddenly. "Why do you care what happens to me?" It was a fair question, and August did not have a good answer. He looked down at his coffee, searching for the right words. "I guess I do not like seeing people trapped," he said finally, "and I do not like bullies. Calhoun is both, and you deserve better." Olivia's expression softened, and for a moment August thought she might cry. But she blinked rapidly and turned away, busying herself with wiping down the already clean bar. "Thank you," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "That means more than you know." August finished his coffee and left, but he found himself drawn back to the saloon over the next few days. He told himself it was because he wanted to make sure Calhoun did not lay hands on Olivia again, but he knew that was only part of the truth. The real reason was that he enjoyed talking to her. Despite the bruise on her cheek and the hard circumstances of her life, Olivia had a warmth and a sharpness that drew him in. She was well read, having taught herself from books she borrowed from the town's small library, and she had opinions on everything from politics to poetry. She made him laugh with her dry observations about the saloon's patrons, and she listened with genuine interest when he talked about his years working ranches across Texas and beyond. He learned that she was 23, that she had grown up in San Antonio as the daughter of a seamstress, and that her father had died when she was 15, leaving her and her mother to fend for themselves. She had worked a dozen different jobs over the years, always sending most of her earnings home to her mother. When her mother's health had started to decline, Olivia had given up everything to care for her, moving to Desdemona in a desperate hope that a change of scenery might help. August found himself telling her things he rarely shared with anyone. About growing up on a small farm in Missouri, about leaving home at 17 after his father had died and the bank had taken the land, about the years he had spent drifting, working cattle drives and ranch jobs, never staying in one place long enough to put down roots, about the loneliness that sometimes crept up on him in the quiet moments, the sense that he was searching for something he could not quite name. On the fourth day, Olivia's mother took a turn for the worse. August was at the saloon when Olivia came running in, her face pale and her eyes wild with panic. "I need to go," she told Calhoun breathlessly. "My mother, she cannot breathe, and I need to get the doctor." Calhoun looked up from the ledger he was writing in, his expression hard. "You leave now, and you do not come back," he said flatly. Olivia stared at him in disbelief. "My mother is dying," she said, her voice breaking. "That is not my problem," Calhoun replied. "I need someone behind this bar, and if it is not you, I will find someone else." August, who had been sitting at a table near the window, stood up so fast his chair scraped loudly against the floor. "Have you no decency at all?" he demanded, striding over to the bar. Calhoun looked up at him with narrowed eyes. "This is between me and my employee," he said coldly. "You would do well to stay out of it." "Olivia, go," August said, ignoring Calhoun. "Get the doctor. I will handle this." Olivia looked between the two men, her hands clenched into fists at her sides. Then she turned and ran, the door slamming behind her. Calhoun stood up, his face darkening with rage. "You have interfered for the last time, Anderson," he snarled. "Get out of my saloon." "Gladly," August said, "but not before I tell you what I think of a man who would keep a woman from her dying mother." "I do not care what you think," Calhoun spat. "You are just another drifter cowboy with no ties and no sense. You will be gone in a week, and I will still be here running this business?" "Maybe," August said, "but at least I will be able to look at myself in the mirror." He left before Calhoun could respond, following the direction Olivia had gone. He found her at the doctor's office, a small building at the end of the main street. The doctor, an older man with kind eyes and a graying beard, was already preparing his bag. Olivia was pacing in the waiting area, her hands wringing together. "The doctor will go to her," she said when she saw August, "but I do not have the money to pay him. He says he will trust me for it, but I have no idea how I will earn it now." "Do not worry about that right now," August said gently. "Let us just make sure your mother gets the care she needs." They walked together to the small house Olivia shared with her mother, a modest building that leaned slightly to one side. Inside it was clean but sparse, with only the bare necessities. Olivia's mother was in the single bedroom, lying on a narrow bed and struggling for breath. Her face was flushed with fever, and her eyes were glazed. The doctor examined her quickly, his expression grave. "The fever has gotten into her lungs," he said quietly to Olivia. "I will do what I can, but I will not lie to you. She is very ill." Olivia nodded, her eyes filling with tears. August stood back, feeling helpless. He watched as the doctor administered medicine and instructed Olivia on how to care for her mother. When the doctor finally left, promising to return in the morning, Olivia sank into a chair beside the bed and buried her face in her hands. August knelt beside her, his hand hovering uncertainly over her shoulder. "Olivia," he said softly. She looked up at him, tears streaming down her cheeks. "I do not know what to do," she whispered. "I have lost my job, and I have no money, and my mother is dying, and I cannot fix any of it." "You do not have to fix it alone," August said. He made a decision in that moment, one that probably was not wise, but felt right all the same. "I will pay the doctor," he said, "and I will stay here and help you take care of your mother." Olivia shook her head, fresh tears spilling over. "I cannot ask you to do that," she said. "You have already done too much." "You are not asking," August said firmly. "I am offering, and I do not offer lightly." For a long moment, Olivia just looked at him, searching his face, as if trying to understand why he would do such a thing for a woman he barely knew. Whatever she saw there must have convinced her, because she nodded slowly. "Thank you," she said, her voice breaking. "I do not know how I will ever repay you." "You do not have to repay me," August said. "Just let me help." Over the next week, August became a fixture in that little house. He brought food and medicine, paid the doctor's bills without complaint, and sat with Olivia through the long nights when her mother's breathing was so labored it seemed like each breath might be her last. They talked in the quiet darkness, their voices low so as not to disturb the sick woman. They shared stories and fears and hopes, and August found himself opening up in ways he never had before. He told Olivia about the ranch job he was supposed to be starting and how he had sent word to Marcus Tate that he would be delayed. He told her about the years he had spent alone, always moving, never letting himself get close to anyone because it was easier that way. And he told her, in a moment of vulnerability that surprised even himself, that he was tired of being alone. Olivia listened, her hand sometimes finding his in the darkness. She told him about the dreams she had given up, the hope she had once had of becoming a teacher, and how life had slowly worn those dreams down to nothing. She told him about the loneliness of caring for her mother, of watching the woman who had raised her slowly slip away. And she told him, her voice trembling, that she had not felt this kind of connection with anyone in a very long time. On the 8th night, Olivia's mother's fever finally broke. The doctor pronounced her out of immediate danger, though he cautioned that she would need months of rest and care to fully recover. Olivia wept with relief, and August found himself holding her as she cried, his own throat tight with emotion. As the days turned into weeks, Olivia's mother slowly regained her strength. August continued to help, finding odd jobs around town to pay for their expenses. He fixed fences, mucked stables, and did whatever work was available. He did not mind the labor. It gave him a purpose and a reason to stay. And he wanted to stay, he realized. For the first time in his life, he had found a place and a person that made him want to stop running. He looked forward to the evenings spent in Olivia's small house, to the way her face lit up when he walked through the door, to the conversations that stretched late into the night. He found himself noticing little things about her, The way she tucked a strand of hair behind her ear when she was thinking, the sound of her laugh, the warmth in her eyes when she looked at him. He was falling in love with her, he knew. It was not something he had planned or expected, but it was happening all the same, as inevitable as the sunrise. One evening, as they sat on the porch of her house watching the sun dip below the horizon, Olivia turned to him. Her mother was asleep inside, her breathing steady and calm for the first time in months. "I have been thinking," Olivia said quietly. "About what?" August asked. "About what you said that first day," Olivia replied. "About the job at the ranch? Is the offer still open?" August felt his heart skip a beat. "It is," he said carefully. "But your mother—" "The doctor says she is strong enough to travel now, as long as we take it slow," Olivia interrupted, "and I have been thinking that maybe a fresh start is exactly what we need. A place where we can both breathe, where I do not have to worry about how we will pay for the next meal or the next bottle of medicine." "Are you sure?" August asked. "It is a big decision." Olivia looked at him, and there was something in her gaze that made his breath catch. "I am sure," she said, "because it is not just about the job. It is about you. I do not want to say goodbye to you, August. I do not want you to leave." August reached out and took her hand, his thumb brushing over her knuckles. "I do not want to leave either," he said quietly. "I was trying to figure out how to tell you that." "Then tell me now, Ma," Olivia said, leaning closer. August cupped her face with his free hand, his touch gentle as he traced the curve of her cheek where the bruise had finally faded. "I love you, Olivia Jenkins, sir," he said, the words coming easier than he had expected. "I think I have loved you since the moment I saw you stand up to that drunk, even when you knew it would cost you. You are the bravest, kindest, most beautiful woman I have ever met, and I want to spend the rest of my life proving that to you." Olivia's eyes filled with tears, but she was smiling. "I love you too," she whispered. "I did not think I could, not after everything. But you have shown me what it means to be cared for, to be valued. You make me want to believe in happy endings again." August kissed her then, a soft, tentative kiss that quickly deepened as she wrapped her arms around his neck. It felt like coming home, like finding the thing he had been searching for all these years. When they finally pulled apart, both of them were breathless and grinning like fools. "So we are really doing this?" Olivia asked, her voice full of wonder. "We are going to the ranch together?" "We are," August confirmed. "All three of us. I have already written to Marcus, and he is expecting us. He says Clara is thrilled at the idea of having another woman around. She has been outnumbered by men for too long." Olivia laughed, the sound bright and free. "When do we leave?" "As soon as you're ready," August said. "There is no rush. We will take our time, make sure your mother is comfortable." They left Desdemona 2 weeks later, on a cool morning in early autumn. August had purchased a sturdy wagon and a pair of horses, loading it with their belongings and enough supplies for the journey north. Olivia's mother, whose name was Margaret, was wrapped in blankets and settled comfortably in the back of the wagon. She was still weak, but her eyes were bright with hope as they rolled out of town. Olivia sat beside August on the driver's seat, her hand resting on his knee. As they passed the Red Canyon Saloon, Calhoun was standing outside, his arms crossed over his chest. He watched them go with a scowl, but August paid him no mind. That chapter of their lives was closed, and ahead of them lay something new and full of promise. The journey to Mineral Wells took nearly a week, traveling slowly to accommodate Margaret's health. They stopped frequently to rest, setting up camp under the wide Texas sky. At night, August and Olivia would sit by the fire while Margaret slept in the wagon, talking about their plans for the future. August told her about the rocking M, about the sprawling land and the good people who worked there. Olivia told him about her dreams of teaching, and August promised that they would find a way to make that happen. They reached the ranch on a golden afternoon, the sun warm on their faces as they crested a hill and saw the valley spread out below them. The rocking M was everything that August had promised and more. The ranch house was large and welcoming, built from sturdy timber with a wide porch that wrapped around the front. Barns and outbuildings dotted the property, and in the distance cattle grazed peacefully. Marcus Tate was waiting for them on the porch, a broad-shouldered man with a weathered face and a kind smile. Beside him stood his wife Clara, a petite woman with graying hair and eyes that sparkled with warmth. They greeted August like family, and they welcomed Olivia and Margaret with open arms. "We have prepared a room for your mother," Clara said, taking Olivia's hands in hers. "It is on the ground floor, so she will not have to manage stairs, and there is plenty of space for you and August as well." Olivia blinked in surprise. "August and me?" she repeated. Clara glanced between them, her smile widening. "Well, I assumed, given the way you two look at each other. Am I mistaken?" Olivia blushed, and August cleared his throat. "We have not exactly talked about the details," he admitted. "But no, you are not mistaken." "Good," Marcus said, clapping August on the shoulder, "because I have had a little cabin fixed up for newlyweds if you are interested. It is just over that rise there, close enough to the main house, but private enough for you to have your own space." August looked at Olivia, his heart in his throat. "What do you think?" he asked softly. Olivia's eyes were shining. "I think it sounds perfect," she said. They were married a month later, in a simple ceremony held in the ranch's main parlor. Margaret was well enough to attend, sitting in a chair of honor with tears of joy streaming down her face. Clara had helped Olivia sew a dress from soft cream-colored fabric, and August wore his best shirt and a new vest that Marcus had insisted on buying for him. The local preacher officiated, and the ranch hands all crowded in to witness the union. When August slipped the simple gold band onto Olivia's finger and kissed her, the room erupted in cheers. It was the happiest day of August's life, and from the look on Olivia's face, he knew she felt the same. They moved into the cabin that evening, a cozy space with a bedroom, a sitting area, and a small kitchen. It was not large, but it was theirs, and that was all that mattered. August carried Olivia over the threshold, both of them laughing, and they spent their first night as husband and wife wrapped in each other's arms, whispering promises and making plans for the future. Life on the rocking M fell into a comfortable rhythm. August worked with the cattle, earning his keep, and then some with his skill and dedication. Olivia helped Clara with the household, and in her spare time, she began teaching the ranch workers' children to read and write. It started with just a few students meeting in the cabin, but word spread quickly, and soon Olivia had a dozen children coming to her makeshift schoolroom 3 times a week. Margaret's health continued to improve in the clean air and peaceful environment of the ranch. She took up sewing again, mending clothes and making quilts that she sold in town. She and Clara became fast friends, spending their afternoons on the porch with their needlework, talking and laughing like they had known each other for years. August watched Olivia bloom in this new life, her confidence and happiness growing with each passing day. She smiled more, laughed more, and the shadows that had haunted her eyes when he first met her faded away entirely. She was thriving, and knowing that he had played a part in that made August's heart swell with pride and love. As the months passed, August and Olivia settled into their life together. They learned each other's rhythms and quirks, the way married couples do. August discovered that Olivia was a terrible cook, but an excellent baker, and that she sang off key when she thought no one was listening. Olivia learned that August was an early riser who loved the quiet of dawn, and that he had a habit of talking to the horses like they were old friends. They had their disagreements, of course. August could be stubborn when he thought he was right, and Olivia had a temper that flared when she felt she was being dismissed. But they always talked things through, neither of them willing to let resentment fester. They had both seen too much of what bitterness could do, and they were determined to build something better. Their first winter on the ranch was harsh, with icy winds and snow that piled up against the cabin walls. But inside they kept each other warm, spending long evenings by the fire reading aloud or simply talking. August would hold Olivia close, her head resting on his shoulder, and think about how lucky he was to have found her. In the spring, Olivia discovered she was pregnant. She told August one morning as they were getting ready for the day, her voice nervous and excited all at once. August's first reaction was shock, followed quickly by overwhelming joy. He picked her up and spun her around, both of them laughing and crying at the same time. "We are going to have a baby," August said, the words sinking in. "We are going to be parents." "Are you happy?" Olivia asked, her hands resting on his chest. "Happy does not even begin to cover it," August said, kissing her forehead. "You have given me everything, Olivia. A home, a purpose, and now a family. I love you more than I ever thought possible." "I love you too," Olivia said, tears streaming down her face. "So much." They told Margaret and the Tates that evening, and the celebration that followed was loud and joyful. Clara immediately began planning, talking about knitting blankets and setting up a nursery in the cabin. Marcus broke out a bottle of his best whiskey, and they toasted to the future, to new life, and new beginnings. Olivia's pregnancy was not easy. She was sick for the first few months, barely able to keep anything down. August hovered over her anxiously, bringing her water and crackers and anything else she thought might help. Clara was a steadying presence, assuring them both that this was normal and that Olivia would feel better soon. And she did. By the time summer arrived, Olivia's sickness had passed, and she was glowing with health. Her belly grew round and full, and August found himself constantly drawn to it, his hand resting on the curve as he felt their baby move beneath his palm. It was a miracle, he thought. A living, breathing miracle. Olivia continued teaching as long as she was able, though she eventually had to stop when she became too tired to stand for long periods. The children made her a card signed with all their names, and Clara threw her a small party to celebrate the upcoming birth. The baby came on a crisp October morning as the leaves were turning gold and red. Olivia's labor was long and difficult, and there were moments when August thought he might lose his mind with worry. He paced outside the cabin while Clara and the midwife attended to Olivia, his hands clenched into fists and his heart in his throat. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, he heard the thin, reedy cry of a newborn. Clara appeared in the doorway, her face tired but smiling. "You have a son," she said. "A healthy, beautiful boy. And Olivia is fine. She is tired, but she is fine." August nearly collapsed with relief. He rushed inside to find Olivia propped up in bed, her hair damp with sweat and her face pale but radiant. In her arms was a tiny bundle wrapped in a soft blanket. August approached slowly, his hands shaking as he looked down at his son for the first time. The baby was red-faced and squalling, his little fists waving in the air, but to August he was the most beautiful thing he had ever seen. "Hello there, little one," August said softly, his voice thick with emotion. "I am your papa." Olivia smiled up at him, exhausted but happy. "Do you want to hold him?" she asked. August nodded, and Olivia carefully placed the baby in his arms. The weight was solid and real, and August felt a surge of love so intense it almost brought him to his knees. "He is perfect," he whispered. "What should we name him?" They had talked about names during the pregnancy, but nothing had felt quite right. Now, looking down at his son, August had an idea. "What about Aaron?" he said. "After my grandfather. He was a good man, and I would like to honor his memory." Olivia's eyes filled with tears. "Aaron Anderson," she said, testing the name. "I love it." Aaron grew quickly, a sturdy boy with his father's blue eyes and his mother's dark hair. August was a devoted father, spending every spare moment with his son. He carried Aaron around the ranch, showing him the horses and the cattle, talking to him even though the baby was too young to understand. Olivia would watch them from the porch, her heart full to bursting. Margaret doted on her grandson, knitting him blankets and singing him lullabies. She had regained much of her health, and having Aaron in her life seemed to give her a new sense of purpose. She would sit with him for hours, rocking him gently and telling him stories about his mother as a little girl. As Aaron grew from a baby to a toddler, the ranch continued to thrive. August became Marcus's right-hand man, taking on more responsibility and proving himself invaluable. Olivia resumed her teaching, now holding classes in a small building that Marcus had constructed specifically for that purpose. She had nearly 20 students now, ranging in age from 5 to 15, and she loved every moment of it. Life was good, better than August had ever dared to hope. He and Olivia had built a life together, one filled with love and laughter and hard work. They had their struggles, of course. There were seasons when money was tight and winters when the cold seemed endless. But they faced everything together, side by side, and that made all the difference. When Aaron was 3, Olivia became pregnant again. This time the pregnancy was easier, and she gave birth to a daughter they named Alice. Alice was a quiet baby, with her mother's brown eyes and a serious expression that made everyone laugh. Aaron was fascinated by his little sister, and he would sit beside her cradle for hours watching her sleep. August felt like his heart might burst with happiness. He had a wife he adored, 2 healthy children, and a life that felt meaningful and full. Sometimes late at night, he would lie awake and think about that day in the Red Canyon Saloon, the day he had poured that bottle of whiskey onto the floor. It had seemed like such a small thing at the time, an impulsive act of defiance. But it had changed everything. It had brought Olivia into his life, and with her, a future he had never imagined possible. Years passed, and the children grew. Aaron became a skilled rider, following his father around the ranch and learning everything he could about cattle and horses. Alice turned out to have her mother's love of learning, and she would spend hours in the schoolroom, reading every book she could get her hands on. Margaret lived to see both her grandchildren grow into capable, kind young people. She passed away peacefully in her sleep when Aaron was 10 and Alice was 7, leaving behind a legacy of love and resilience. Olivia grieved deeply for her mother, but she took comfort in knowing that Margaret had spent her final years happy and surrounded by family. August and Olivia grew older together, their love deepening with each passing year. They added 2 more children to their family, a son they named Adam and another daughter they named Abigail. The cabin eventually became too small, and Marcus helped them build a larger house on a piece of land he deeded to them as a gift. August never forgot where he had come from, the years of drifting and loneliness, but he also never took for granted what he had found. Every morning he woke up beside Olivia and thanked whatever forces had brought them together. Every evening, he sat down to dinner with his family and marveled at the noise and chaos and love that filled his home. Olivia continued teaching for many years, eventually opening a proper school in Mineral Wells. She became known throughout the region as an excellent educator, and former students would come back to visit, thanking her for the foundation she had given them. She was proud of her work, but she always said that her greatest accomplishment was her family. As they entered their later years, August and Olivia would sit on the porch of their home, watching the sun set over the land they had worked and loved for so many years. Their children had grown and started families of their own, though they all stayed close, building homes on the ranch and carrying on the legacy. "Do you ever think about that day in Desdemona?" Olivia asked one evening, her hand clasped in August's. Her hair was streaked with silver now, and there were lines around her eyes, but to August she was as beautiful as she had been the day he met her. "All the time," August admitted. "I think about how close I came to just riding past that saloon. If I had stopped somewhere else for a drink, or if I decided to push on instead of staying the night, we might never have met." "Fate has a funny way of working," Olivia said, resting her head on his shoulder. "I was so angry that day, so convinced that my life was over. And then you walked in and changed everything." "You changed everything for me too," August said, kissing the top of her head. "You gave me a reason to stop running, a reason to believe that I could have more than just a life on the move. You gave me a home, Olivia. You gave me love." "And you gave me hope," Olivia said softly. "When I thought I had lost everything, you showed me that there was still good in the world. You stood up for me when no one else would, and you poured that bottle of whiskey on the ground instead of giving in to that awful man. It was the bravest thing I had ever seen." August chuckled. "It was just whiskey," he said. "It was not just whiskey," Olivia corrected, lifting her head to look at him. "It was a statement. It was you telling the world that I mattered, that my dignity mattered more than their comfort or their expectations. It was you choosing me even when you had no reason to. I had every reason to, August said, cupping her face in his hands. You were worth choosing then, and you are worth choosing every single day. They sat together as the stars began to appear, the night air cool and comfortable. Around them the ranch was alive with the sounds of family. Grandchildren played in the yard, their laughter ringing out clear and bright. Their children moved through the houses they had built, preparing meals and settling in for the evening. It was not a perfect life. There had been heartaches and losses, struggles and setbacks, but it was a good life, a full life, and it was theirs. August thought about the man he had been before he met Olivia, the drifter with no roots and no real purpose. That man felt like a stranger now, someone from another lifetime. He had found his purpose in loving Olivia, in building a life with her, in raising their children and watching them grow. He had found his purpose in standing up for what was right, even when it was hard, even when it cost him something. And he had found his purpose in this land and the work of his hands and the legacy he would leave behind. As the years continued to roll on, August and Olivia remained pillars of their community. They celebrated anniversaries and birthdays, welcomed new grandchildren and great-grandchildren into the world. They watched as their children became leaders in their own right, carrying on the values they had been taught. On their 50th wedding anniversary, the family threw them a huge celebration. The ranch was filled with people, friends, and family traveling from all over Texas to join in the festivities. There was music and dancing, food and laughter, and speeches that went on for hours. When it was August's turn to speak, he stood up slowly, his joints creaking with age, but his mind still sharp. He looked around at all the faces gathered there, people whose lives had been touched by his and Olivia's love story. "I am not much for speeches," he began, his voice carrying in the quiet. "But I want to say something about the woman I married 50 years ago today." He turned to Olivia, who was sitting beside him, her eyes already glistening with tears. "When I met Olivia, I was a man with nothing, no home, no family, no real hope for the future. And she was a woman trapped in an impossible situation, working for a cruel man and watching her mother die. By all rights, our story should have ended there, in that saloon in Desdemona. But it did not, because we chose to fight for something better." He reached out and took her hand, his thumb brushing over her knuckles just like he had done so many times before. "Olivia taught me what it means to love someone, not just in the easy times, but in the hard times too. She taught me what it means to build a life together, to stand by each other no matter what comes. And she gave me the greatest gift I could ever ask for, a family, a home, and a reason to wake up every morning grateful for another day." There was not a dry eye in the crowd. August sat back down, and Olivia leaned over to kiss him, her tears spilling over onto his weathered cheeks. "I love you," she whispered, "today, tomorrow, and always." "Always," August agreed, holding her close. They lived many more years together, growing old in the home they had built and surrounded by the family they had created. When August finally passed away at the age of 87, it was in his sleep, with Olivia beside him holding his hand. He went peacefully, a smile on his face, dreaming of the life he had lived and the woman he had loved. Olivia followed him 2 years later, her heart giving out one quiet morning. Her children found her in her rocking chair on the porch, a blanket over her lap, and a book open on the table beside her. She looked peaceful, and they knew that wherever she was with August again. They were buried side by side on a hill overlooking the ranch, beneath a large oak tree that August had planted 50 years earlier. The entire community turned out for the funeral, mourning the loss of 2 people who had touched so many lives. But even in death, August and Olivia's legacy lived on. Their children and grandchildren carried on the work of the ranch. The school Olivia had founded continued to educate new generations. and the story of how they met became a legend in the family. It was a story told to children and grandchildren, a reminder that love could be found in the most unexpected places, and that sometimes the smallest acts of courage could change the course of a life. The bottle of whiskey that August had poured onto the floor of the Red Canyon Saloon all those years ago was long forgotten by everyone except those who had been there. But the consequences of that action, the ripples it had sent out into the world, continued on. It had brought two people together who might never have met otherwise. It had created a family, a legacy, and a love story that would be remembered for generations. And in the end, that was all that really mattered. Not the whiskey, not the saloon, not the hardships they had faced. What mattered was the love they had built, the life they had shared, and the family they had created together. It was a story of hope and resilience, of standing up for what was right, and of finding love in the most unexpected of places. August and Olivia Anderson had lived a good life, a full life, and a life that proved that even in the hardest of times, love could conquer all. Their story was a testament to the power of choosing compassion over cruelty, of standing up for those who could not stand up for themselves, and of never giving up on the possibility of a happy ending. The ranch continued to thrive long after they were gone, a living monument to everything they had built. And on warm summer evenings, when the sun set over the Texas hills and the air was filled with the sounds of family and laughter, it was easy to imagine that somewhere, somehow, August and Olivia were still there, sitting on their porch and watching over the legacy they had created. Their love story had begun with a bottle of whiskey poured onto a saloon floor, a simple act of defiance that had changed two lives forever, and it had ended with a family that stretched across generations, a testament to the power of love and the enduring strength of the human spirit. It was a story that proved that heroes came in all forms, that love could be found in the darkest of places, and that sometimes the bravest thing a person could do was to choose kindness in a world that often demanded otherwise. August and Olivia's story was the Wild West at its finest, a tale of cowboys and courage, of hardship and hope, and of a love that had lasted a lifetime and beyond. It was a story that would be told and retold for generations to come, a reminder that even in the roughest, most unforgiving landscape, love could take root and flourish, growing into something beautiful and lasting. And so beneath that oak tree on the hill, August and Olivia rested together, their journey complete, but their legacy living on. They had found each other against all odds, had built a life together despite every obstacle, and had loved each other with a depth and devotion that transcended time itself. Their story was proof that true love existed, that it was worth fighting for, and that when two people chose to stand together, they could overcome anything. The end of their lives was not an ending at all, but rather a continuation of everything they had built. Their children raised their own families with the same values August and Olivia had instilled in them. Their grandchildren grew up hearing stories of the brave cowboy who had poured out a bottle of whiskey to defend a woman's honor, and of the strong woman who had stood up for what was right even when it cost her everything. And their great-grandchildren walked the same land their ancestors had worked, carrying on a legacy of love and resilience. In the town of Mineral Wells, where Olivia's school still stood, a plaque was placed in her honor. It read, "Olivia Jenkins Anderson, educator, wife, mother, and friend. She taught us that education was the key to freedom, and that love was the greatest lesson of all." And beside it, another plaque for August. August Anderson, rancher, husband, father, and protector, he showed us that courage was not the absence of fear, but the willingness to stand up for what was right, no matter the cost. Their story became woven into the fabric of the community, a touchstone for what was possible when people chose love over hate, compassion over cruelty. Young couples would visit their graves on their wedding days, asking for blessings on their own marriages. Parents would tell their children about August and Olivia when they needed reminders about standing up to bullies or treating others with kindness. The ranch itself became a gathering place for the family, with reunions held every year beneath that same oak tree where August and Olivia were buried. The family would come from all corners of the state and sometimes beyond to reconnect with their roots and remember the two people who had started it all. They would share meals and stories, introduce new babies, and celebrate milestones, and always, they would raise a toast to August and Olivia, but no whiskey. That became a family tradition started by Aaron and carried on by all who came after. Instead, they would pour water onto the ground beside the graves, a symbolic gesture that honored the moment that had brought their family into being. It was a reminder that sometimes the most powerful statements were the ones that refused to participate in cruelty or excess, that chose a different path even when it would have been easier to go along. The Rockingham Ranch continued to be run by Anderson descendants, each generation adding their own contributions while honoring the foundation that August and Olivia had helped build. The school Olivia had founded grew into a full-fledged academy, eventually educating hundreds of students each year. Scholarships were established in both August and Olivia's names, ensuring that children who might not otherwise have the opportunity could receive an education. The little cabin where August and Olivia had started their married life was preserved and maintained, turned into a small museum of sorts for the family. Inside, visitors could see the furniture they had used, the books Olivia had taught from, and even some of August's ranching tools. On the mantel sat a photograph taken on their 50th anniversary, August and Olivia standing together with their arms around each other, their faces weathered by time but their eyes still shining with love. And in a place of honor mounted on the wall was a newspaper clipping from the Desdemona Chronicle, dated just a few months after August and Olivia had left. It was a small article, easy to miss, about how the Red Canyon Saloon had been shut down after Calhoun had been arrested for assault. The article did not mention August or Olivia by name, but the family knew the truth. Sometimes standing up for what was right had consequences that rippled far beyond what anyone could see in the moment. As the decades passed and the 20th century gave way to the 21st, the world changed in ways that August and Olivia could never have imagined. But the values they had embodied, the love they had shared, and the courage they had shown remained timeless. Their story continued to inspire, to comfort, and to remind people that no matter how dark the world might seem, there was always room for hope, for kindness, and for love. The bottle of whiskey that August had poured onto that saloon floor in 1878 was gone, absorbed into the sawdust and swept away long ago. But the act itself lived on, a symbol of defiance against injustice and a testament to the power of standing up for those who could not stand up for themselves. It was a small moment in a large world, but it had been enough to change 2 lives, and through those 2 lives, countless others. August and Olivia Anderson's love story was proof that heroes were not always the loudest or the strongest or the most powerful. Sometimes they were just ordinary people who chose to do the right thing at the right moment, who saw injustice and refused to look away, who found love in unexpected places and held on to it with everything they had. Their story was the Wild West at its most romantic and its most real. It was about struggle and survival, about building something from nothing, about finding family where there was none before. It was about a cowboy who poured out a bottle of whiskey instead of giving in to cruelty, and a woman who refused to compromise her principles even when it cost her everything. It was about 2 people who found each other in the midst of hardship and built a life that lasted a lifetime and beyond. And so as the sun sets over the Texas hills and the oak tree on that hill casts long shadows over 2 graves, the legacy of August and Olivia Anderson lives on. Their love story, which began with an act of courage in a dusty saloon, had grown into something far greater than either of them could have imagined. It had become a family, a community, a tradition, and a reminder that love, when it is true and strong and built on a foundation of respect and honor, can truly conquer all.